At a family dinner, my daughter-in-law called me a disappointment, and something inside me broke. I had spent my entire life giving, sacrificing, loving with everything I had, only to be overlooked, dismissed, and taken for granted. That night, I decided enough was enough. I sold the house my son had always counted on inheriting, leaving them with nothing but their regret. It was my turn to be seen, to finally choose myself. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 62 years old. I live in a small, quiet town just outside of Albany, New York. Most people would describe me as a simple woman, a mother, a wife, and for the last 25 years, a caregiver. I have always kept to myself, content with my modest life, my little garden, and my family. Or at least I thought I had. My world had always been about my family, my husband, my children, and later, my son's family. I had never asked for much, just a little appreciation, a little respect. But I should have known better, because sometimes, when you give and give, without expecting anything in return, people start to believe they're entitled to it all. I had always known that my son, Daniel, would inherit the house. It was a simple thing, really. A home we had lived in for years, a place where his father and I had raised him. It wasn't anything grand or extravagant, just a cozy farmhouse with a view of the hills that Daniel had always loved. Over the years, I had taken good care of it, kept it maintained and tidy. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol of our family, of the years we had spent together. Daniel had always spoken about how much he looked forward to living there again one day, to raising his own family in the same rooms where he had once played and laughed with his sister. He was so proud of it, so full of fond memories. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Then, of course, came Sarah, my daughter-in-law. When she came into the picture, everything changed. I had always welcomed her with open arms, happy that Daniel had found someone to share his life with. At first, she was kind, polite, always smiling when she came over for dinners or family gatherings. But over time, I began to notice things that I had dismissed at first. She would make small comments about how the house could use a makeover, how it was stuck in the past, and how old-fashioned I was. I told myself it was just her way of getting comfortable with us, trying to put her own stamp on things. But as time went on, it became clear that her comments weren't just about the house. They were about me, about my life, about my place in Daniel's world. And every time she made one of those remarks, I would quietly retreat further into myself. I didn't want to rock the boat. After all, she was my daughter-in-law, and I wanted to get along with her. But each time she called the house dated or too small for modern living, something inside me would tighten. She was making it clear that she didn't care for the life Daniel and I had built. Then, at their family dinner last Sunday, everything came to a head. It had started off as a nice evening, as they usually did. The smell of roast chicken wafted through the kitchen, the clink of glasses and silverware setting the usual rhythm. Sarah had been in charge of the menu this time, and everything looked delicious. We ate, we talked, and for a while, everything seemed normal. It wasn't until dessert, when the conversation turned to the future, that things began to unravel. Sarah had brought up the topic of the house again, this time with a pointed edge. "You know, Daniel," she said casually, "if we're ever going to start a family, we'll need something more. Well, something more suited for us. This place is charming, but it's not really practical. Maybe you could sell it when the time comes and buy something bigger. We could even put in a pool for the kids." She was laughing as she said it, but I could hear the undertone, the way she phrased it. I could feel the subtle dig, and I knew exactly what she was getting at. She wanted the house gone, and she didn't think twice about saying it out loud. The place Daniel had called home for his entire life. The place his father and I had worked so hard to keep. She saw it as a burden. I didn't say anything at first. I just tried to brush it off, pretending I hadn't heard. But it gnawed at me. That look in her eyes, that underlying sense of superiority. I could see where this was going, and I wasn't sure I could stomach it anymore. But I kept quiet, like I always did until she spoke again. "You know, Eleanor," she said, her tone turning cool and sharp, "we really need to start thinking about the future. And it's clear you don't need all that space. It's a shame you've held on to this property for so long. Maybe you should consider selling it. You're not getting any younger, and the maintenance must be a lot of work for you at your age." Her words were like a slap across my face. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about me, about my life, my choices, my worth. And in that moment, something inside me broke. She wasn't just dismissing the house. She was dismissing me, my effort, my love, my years of hard work. She was telling me that I was a disappointment, that I had nothing left to offer. And for the first time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I stood up from the table, the chair scraping against the floor, and for the first time in years, I didn't care about the consequences. "You know what, Sarah?" I said, my voice steady despite the fire burning inside me. "You're right. I am getting older, and maybe it's time to let go of things. But not for the reasons you think. If you want the house gone so badly, you'll have to wait for it. Because I'm not giving it to you, not now, not ever." The room went silent. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air, and I knew it was the moment everything had changed. Sarah's face flushed with shock and disbelief, but I didn't back down. "I'm going to sell it," I said, my voice rising with the decision that had been building inside me for months. "I'll sell the property, and when I do, I'm not giving it to you or Daniel. I'm keeping the money for myself. Maybe it's time I started living for me. After all, it's my life, not yours." With that, I walked away from the dinner table, leaving them to sit there in stunned silence, the weight of my words settling in. This was it, the end of the road, the start of something new. For once, I was doing something for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel like I was a disappointment. As I left the house, I didn't look back, because I knew in that moment I was leaving behind more than just a property. I was leaving behind all the years of silence, all the years of being overlooked, of being expected to just sit quietly and accept whatever was handed to me. I wasn't going to be a disappointment anymore. Not to them, not to anyone. And when the dust settled, they'd realize what I had done, and they'd be left with nothing but their regret. The days following my declaration felt oddly surreal, like I was floating in a space where everything was in motion, but I wasn't tethered to anything. My mind kept replaying Sarah's face when I told her what I was going to do. The shock, the disbelief. She had no idea what hit her, and I had no idea how much I needed to say those words until I finally did. Daniel had tried to call me the next day. The first time, I didn't pick up. I needed the space, the silence, to sit with my decision and let it settle. The second time, I let it ring out completely. He wasn't ready to hear what I had to say, and honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready to say it. The third time, I picked up. "Mom." Daniel's voice was tight, almost pleading. "What the hell happened last night? You can't just say something like that and walk away." I stayed silent for a moment, my mind racing. The words he was about to say were already etched in my mind, a script I'd heard before in different forms. The concern was there. Yes, but I could feel the underlying judgment. He wasn't asking about my feelings or why I had done what I did. No, he was angry that I had upset his carefully constructed world. I wasn't supposed to be a problem. I wasn't supposed to ruin things. "Daniel," I said, my voice firm but steady, "you've lived your life with Sarah and her plans, and I've stayed quiet. I've helped, I've given, I've kept my mouth shut and tried to make things easy for everyone. But I'm done being the invisible one. I'm done being the one who just goes along with whatever the plan is. The property was always meant to be something for you. It was always meant to be your inheritance, your future. But that was before I realized I was living in their future, not my own." There was a long pause. I could almost hear him trying to process what I was saying. "I don't understand," he finally murmured. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I deserve to live too," I replied. The words were quiet but cut through the silence like a knife. "I've spent my life living for you, for Sarah, for everyone else. But when Sarah sat at that table and called me a disappointment, I saw the truth. She doesn't care about what I want. She doesn't care about me, only about her vision of what she wants. And I've been living in that shadow for too long. I'm not going to keep doing it. Not anymore." I could hear his breath catch on the other end of the phone, the realization sinking in. This wasn't a mother who was simply being emotional. This wasn't a petty tantrum. This was me standing up finally and saying that I deserved something too. Not just respect, but the chance to live my life for me. "Mom," he began again, his voice a little quieter. "We didn't mean for you to feel like that." "Sarah? She didn't mean—" I cut him off, my voice low but determined. "It doesn't matter whether she meant it or not, Daniel. It's how it made me feel. It's how I've felt for years. Invisible, ignored. Every time she made a comment about the house, about the way I lived, I swallowed it. But I can't swallow it anymore. I'm taking control of my life now, and that means selling the property. I'm not leaving it for you. I'm not leaving it for Sarah. I'm keeping it for myself. It's time I started living for me." There was silence on the other end, the kind that stretched out like a chasm between us. I could almost hear him searching for the words, trying to find the right thing to say. But I wasn't giving him a chance to justify Sarah's behavior anymore, to soothe my pain. I was done with that. "Mom, you're upset," he said, his voice finally breaking through. "I get that, but you can't just take the house from us. It's not yours to sell." I let out a sharp laugh, though it didn't hold any humor. "It's my house, Daniel. I've maintained it. I've worked for it. And it's my decision. You and Sarah think you're entitled to it just because you've been planning for years that it's your inheritance. Well, guess what? The inheritance isn't what you think it is. You don't get to control everything about my life, about my decisions, just because you think you've earned it. I'm tired of being part of your plans. Now it's my turn to have a say." I could hear the tension in his breath as he processed the weight of my words. He wanted to argue, I knew. He wanted to say something that would make this all go away. But the truth was, there was no way back now. I had drawn a line in the sand, and there was no erasing it. "You don't get it, Mom," he said finally, his voice soft, almost resigned. "This is going to change everything. The house was supposed to be a part of our future. You can't just take it away." "I already did," I said, the words sharp and final, "and you'll have to figure out your future without it. But for once, Daniel, I'm going to figure out mine." I ended the call, and I let the phone fall into my lap. The silence that followed was deafening, and yet it felt like the most peaceful thing I had ever heard. For the first time in my life, I had taken control of something that was mine. I wasn't just a disappointment anymore. I wasn't just a mother in the background of everyone's story. I was living my own life, and if they didn't like it, then that was something they would have to accept. The storm had been unleashed, but I wasn't going to run from it. I was going to let it wash over me, knowing that in the end I would be standing tall, ready to face whatever came next, and whatever came, I would deal with it, alone, if necessary. But I was no longer afraid of that. I wasn't a disappointment anymore. I was finally living for me. The fallout didn't come all at once. It was a slow burn, like a fire that starts as a small ember, slowly catching on to everything around it until it's raging out of control. Daniel didn't call me again after that conversation, but I knew what he was doing. He was probably talking to Sarah, trying to understand what had happened, trying to convince himself that I was just angry and would come to my senses. But I wasn't going to back down, not this time. The first sign of the storm came a few days later when Sarah showed up at my door unannounced. I hadn't expected her to come, but part of me knew it was inevitable. She was always used to getting her way, and she probably thought that if she just showed up in person, she could talk me out of my decision. When I opened the door, there she was, standing on my doorstep, arms crossed, her face a mixture of frustration and determination. She wasn't here for a friendly chat. I could tell she was already preparing herself for battle. "Eleanor," she said, her voice cool, but I could hear the edge beneath it. "We need to talk." I didn't invite her in. I didn't feel like offering any hospitality after the way she had treated me. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for her to continue. "Look, I don't know what's going on with you, but this has gone too far," she said, trying to sound reasonable, but I could hear the thinly veiled anger in her tone. "You can't just sell the house. Daniel and I have been planning for years for that to be ours. You don't get to just throw that all away." "I'm not throwing anything away, Sarah," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm making a decision for myself, something I've never done before, and if you can't understand that, then that's not my problem." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "You're being unreasonable. This isn't just about the house, Eleanor. It's about family. It's about legacy. It's about the future we've been building." "I don't care about your future plans, Sarah," I said, stepping forward slightly, my voice growing stronger. "I've spent my whole life thinking about your plans, about Daniel's plans, about what's best for everyone else. But I'm done. I've been invisible for too long, and I'm not going to be anymore. I'm doing what's best for me now." She scoffed, clearly taken aback. "You're being selfish. You're throwing everything away over a feeling, over some misplaced idea that we don't respect you." "It's not misplaced, Sarah," I said quietly. "It's real. You and Daniel have been so busy with your perfect little life that you've forgotten about me. You've forgotten that I've been here all along, giving, supporting, doing everything I could to make everyone else happy. But I'm not your servant. I'm not here to play a supporting role in your life anymore." The air between us was thick with tension, and I could feel the shift happening. She was no longer trying to convince me. She was realizing that this wasn't something I was going to change. "Fine," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "You've made your choice, but just know this. When you sell the house, when you walk away from everything, it'll be you who has to live with the consequences, not us. We're the ones who will have to pick up the pieces." I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "If you think I'm going to regret this, then you don't know me at all." And with that, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the driveway. I stood there for a moment watching her leave, and something inside me shifted. I wasn't just making a decision. I was making a stand. For the first time in years, I was standing up for myself, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Daniel didn't speak to me, not directly. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was angry, hurt, and confused, but I didn't let it affect me. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to beg for his understanding. The house was listed. I'd made the decision, and there was no turning back now. It was a strange feeling, watching the sign go up in the yard, knowing that soon this place that had been such a huge part of my life would no longer be mine. But at the same time, there was a sense of relief, a sense of freedom. Then the offers started coming in. The house had always been a charming little farmhouse, but it was clear that its value wasn't just in its structure, it was in its potential. Developers were offering more than I had ever imagined. The phone calls started to feel like a lifeline, each one a reminder that I was making the right choice. The money wasn't just for me. It was my way of reclaiming everything I had lost: my independence, my voice, my right to make decisions for myself. But the calls from Sarah and Daniel didn't stop either. They were relentless, almost frantic at times, trying to change my mind, offering explanations, apologies, and arguments. They couldn't understand. They didn't want to understand. One evening, Daniel left me a message, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Mom, please, you're not thinking clearly." This is going to destroy everything. I need you to think about this. It's not just the house. It's us. It's the family. If you sell it, it'll be the end of everything we've built." I listened to the message, the weight of his words sinking in. But the truth was, he wasn't asking me to keep the house for the sake of family. He was asking me to keep it because he had always expected it. He was asking me to sacrifice my future for his, and that was something I could no longer do. I deleted the message. I wasn't going to be guilted into doing something I didn't want to do anymore. I wasn't going to keep holding on to something for the sake of others' comfort. I was ready to move on, and I wasn't going to let anyone's regrets stop me. It didn't take long before the reality of my decision began to sink in for everyone involved. The calls continued, but now they had a different tone. The anger, the frustration, the confusion. They were all there, but now there was something else in the mix. Guilt, regret. It was as if, with every phone call, the weight of my decision was being felt, not just by me, but by Daniel and Sarah too. They weren't just angry anymore. They were starting to understand that they had underestimated me, that I wasn't just some figure in the background waiting to be used when they needed me. The house sold quickly, much faster than I had anticipated. The developers had made a generous offer, and within days the paperwork was signed and the deal was sealed. I was flooded with a sense of relief and empowerment. This wasn't about the money, it was about taking back my life, about doing something for myself for the first time in decades. But even as the sale went through, the tension with Daniel and Sarah grew. The regret began to seep into their words in a way that couldn't be ignored. His face tight with a mixture of frustration and something else, something that looked a little like fear. When I opened the door, I saw his eyes flicker down to the envelope in my hand, the one I had received from the closing office. He knew what it meant. He knew that everything had changed. "Mom," he began, his voice strained, "I need to talk to you." I stepped aside, silently inviting him in, though I wasn't sure what kind of conversation was ahead. I wasn't sure if he was here to yell, to beg, or to finally understand. I wasn't sure I even cared anymore. He sat down across from me, his hands fidgeting with the sleeve of his shirt, as if he were nervous. This wasn't the son I had known for years, the confident, independent man who had always seemed to know exactly what he wanted. This was someone else, someone who was suddenly realizing that the world he had taken for granted wasn't as secure as he thought. "Why, Mom?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Why did you do it? Why sell the house? Why take it all away from us?" I could feel the weight of his words, but I wasn't going to shy away from the truth. Not this time. I took a deep breath, watching him carefully, weighing my words. "I didn't sell it to hurt you, Daniel. I didn't sell it because I wanted to take something from you. I sold it because I had to. Because for years, I've been living in the shadow of your plans, of Sarah's plans. I spent my life thinking that if I just kept giving, just kept staying quiet, it would all work out. But it didn't. You took it all for granted. The house, my sacrifices, everything." His eyes darkened, but there was a flicker of something in his gaze, something that almost resembled understanding. I could tell he wasn't used to hearing me speak this way, wasn't used to hearing me call out the truth. "I never asked you to give up everything for us, Mom," he said, his voice tinged with guilt. "I never wanted you to feel like you had to do everything. We didn't mean for you to be invisible." There it was, the unspoken truth. That was what it had always been about. I had been invisible to them, to both of them, to Sarah, to Daniel, to everyone. My worth had been tied to what I could provide, to what I could give, but no one had ever stopped to consider what I needed, what I wanted, the life I had sacrificed to give them theirs. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Daniel," I said, my voice softening, but only a little. "But the truth is, I let you. I let you and Sarah make all the decisions, assume that I was fine, that I would always just go along with whatever was best for you. I'm not mad anymore. But I'm done. I'm done being your afterthought." There was silence between us, and I could see the weight of my words settling on him. This wasn't a conversation he was prepared for. He wasn't ready to hear this from his mother, the woman who had always been the steady, silent force in his life. He wanted me to be the matriarch, the one who held everything together without questioning it, but I couldn't do that anymore. "Do you really think we'll never forgive you for this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "You've torn everything apart, Mom, and for what?" "For me," I said, my words final. "I did this for me, because I have to start living for myself. And if that means you're upset, if that means you're disappointed, then I'll live with it. I won't apologize for it, and I won't regret it." Daniel stood up, his hands clenched at his sides. "I can't believe you're doing this," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You're tearing the family apart." "I'm not tearing anything apart, Daniel," I said, standing up as well. "You've been so caught up in your future, your legacy, your plans. And in the middle of all that, you've forgotten that I'm a person too. I've been living for you, for Sarah, for everyone else. I've been invisible, and I'm done with that." He didn't say anything more. He stood there for a moment, his eyes locked with mine, but I could see the storm brewing inside him. It was too much for him to comprehend, too much for him to accept. But I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness. I had made my decision, and I was standing by it. He turned and left without another word, his footsteps heavy as he walked down the front steps. I didn't chase him. I didn't call after him. This was his fight now, his battle to reckon with. I had already fought mine. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew that what had been broken couldn't be fixed. But what I had gained, what I had taken back, was worth everything. I had finally put myself first, and no one could take that away from me. The regret would be theirs to live with, and I was okay with that. The days after Daniel's visit were eerily quiet. The house, now devoid of its familiar clatter, felt empty. Emptier than I had ever experienced. It wasn't just the loss of the property, though that was certainly part of it. It was the silence that had descended upon my family, the stark absence of the constant noise that had once filled our lives, the calls, the dinners, the expectations. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was living in response to others' needs. For once, I wasn't part of a family unit built on obligation and unspoken rules. I was living for myself, and I didn't have to explain why. But even as I relished the space and the freedom that had followed my decision, the weight of what I had done still lingered. I knew the rift between Daniel, Sarah, and me was growing, becoming more unbridgeable by the day. Every message I received from them, every plea for understanding, only reminded me of the path I had chosen and the consequences that would follow. Sarah's calls became more frequent, more desperate. At first, she had been brash and angry, demanding that I reverse my decision. But now, the tone had changed. There was no more pretending, no more playing the perfect daughter-in-law. Now it was about guilt. "Eleanor, please." Her voice came through trembling on the other end of the line one afternoon. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We've always been there for you. This isn't just about the house. It's about us. It's about family. If you think you can just take everything away and not have consequences, you're wrong." I took a deep breath, not letting the guilt she tried to push onto me creep in. "I'm not taking anything away, Sarah," I said evenly. "I'm taking something for myself. For once, I'm making a decision that's about me. You may not understand it, but this is my life, not a consolation prize for what you and Daniel think you deserve." There was silence on the other end of the line, but I knew she was struggling to find a response. It wasn't the reaction I had expected, shouting, demands, the constant pressure to bend. This time, she was speechless. For once, she didn't have an argument, and it felt empowering. "I don't want to lose you, Eleanor," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't want you to think we don't appreciate everything you've done for us. I've been trying to create a future for our family, and I thought that included everything. You, the house, everything we planned. I didn't answer right away. I had heard this before, this mix of frustration and regret. The thing was, it had never been about the house or the plans. It had always been about their assumption that I was there to play a role, one that made their lives easier. And when I didn't fit into that role anymore, they didn't know how to react. "I don't know what the future holds, Sarah," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "But I can't keep living in a way that leaves me invisible, waiting for you and Daniel to decide what's best for me. I can't keep putting myself last." There was a long pause. I didn't know if she was processing my words or simply trying to find the right thing to say. But finally, she spoke again. "I understand," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "But I want you to know that we do care. We didn't see it before. We took it for granted, and I'm sorry for that." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know, Sarah. But it's time I stopped caring so much about your version of things. It's time for me to have mine." I ended the call, not feeling the need to say more. The conversation had shifted from confrontation to a kind of reluctant understanding. Maybe this was what I had been hoping for all along, just a little acknowledgement that my feelings mattered too. But it didn't erase the fact that it had taken me this long to make them see me. The days continued to pass, and I settled into a routine I had never known. The house, now empty of its history, still felt like home in the sense that it was where I had spent so much of my life. But there was a new chapter ahead of me, and for once I wasn't afraid to embrace it. I began to explore new hobbies, new ways to fill the hours that once revolved around my family. I enrolled in a painting class at the local community center, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. I spent my mornings reading, walking, and reconnecting with parts of myself that had been buried under years of sacrifice and silence. And then, the unexpected happened. I received a letter from Daniel. It was formal, more like an official document than a personal letter, but I could feel the weight of his words, the emotions behind them. He hadn't asked me to undo my decision. He hadn't begged for forgiveness. Instead, he had written to say that he understood in his own way what I had done. "Mom," it began, "I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything that's happened. I've been angry, hurt, confused, but I finally understand that what you did wasn't about the house, about money, or anything material. It was about you, and for that, I'm sorry. I never gave you the space to be your own person. I took for granted that you would always be there, always put us first. I didn't realize how much I needed to stop and listen. You were right." I read the letter 3 times before I could digest it fully. It wasn't an apology in the way I had always imagined, words I could forgive. But it was enough. Enough for me to feel like I wasn't alone anymore, like I hadn't made this decision in vain. He didn't ask for a reunion or a fix. He didn't ask for me to change my mind. What he did was acknowledge that I had made the right choice for myself, and for the first time in years, I wasn't just a supporting character in their lives. I was me, and that acknowledgement, though long overdue, was all I needed to feel a weight lift from my chest. I placed the letter on my kitchen table, staring at it for a moment, letting the words settle in. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with my decision. Whatever came next, whatever the future held, I was ready for it, and I wasn't looking back. The end of this chapter was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new life, one where I got to decide the path forward, and in that, I found my freedom. As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effect of my decision continued to unfold. The house was sold, the money was transferred into an account that was entirely mine, and slowly but surely, I started to settle into a life that didn't revolve around anyone else's expectations. The first few months were a mix of relief and loneliness. I didn't have to cater to family dinners anymore. I didn't have to be the one who showed up, who quietly accepted that my role was to listen and support without ever being seen for who I was. But in the quiet that followed, I found myself facing something I hadn't expected. The void that had once been filled by my family, by the idea of being needed, was now empty. I started to feel the weight of isolation, something I hadn't truly known before. Even though I had made this bold decision to live for myself, there were moments when the quiet felt suffocating. I would look at the new small apartment I had moved into, the walls filled with a few hand-picked pieces of furniture, the shelves empty, save for a few books, and I realized that in my pursuit of freedom, I had neglected the fact that family had once meant something to me. It had been my identity for so long, but now I had to rebuild that. I had to learn who I was without the title of mother, caregiver, wife, or even daughter-in-law. I spent hours walking around the local park, listening to the sounds of children playing in the distance, couples strolling hand in hand, their lives so intertwined, so different from the new, solitary life I had found myself leading. I knew it would take time. I knew that healing would not be instant, that there was no magic pill that could fill the gap left by years of sacrifice. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the silence. I wasn't afraid to face it head on, to sit with it and breathe through the discomfort. I began to make new connections. I took that pottery class I had been eyeing for years, and to my surprise, I loved it. There was something so grounding about the act of shaping clay, watching it transform with my hands. It reminded me of the work I had done all my life, not in the literal sense, but in the way I had shaped my role in the family, always adapting, always molding myself to fit the needs of others. One day, while I was working in the pottery studio, a woman came up to me. She was older than me, with salt and pepper hair and a kind smile. Her name was Lila, and she had been taking pottery for years. We struck up a conversation about the clay, about the process of creating something beautiful from raw material, and before long we were meeting for coffee once a week. Lila had been through her own struggles, her own stories of family, of sacrifice, and she understood perhaps more than anyone what it was like to spend a lifetime putting yourself last. Lila became my first true friend in a long time. She was a reflection of the woman I was becoming, someone who didn't need to be validated by others to feel whole, someone who understood the importance of nurturing yourself first. Over time, she encouraged me to begin exploring my artistic side, to think about what I wanted to create, not just for others, but for me. Her support was quiet but profound. She never judged me for the decisions I had made. Instead, she helped me see that I could create a life that was mine, that wasn't defined by what I had been to others, but by what I could become for myself. Still, there were moments when I felt the weight of the regret I knew Daniel and Sarah were carrying. They didn't reach out much, not directly anyway. The occasional message would come through, usually a generic holiday greeting or a half-hearted attempt at reconnecting. I could tell they were testing the waters, waiting to see if I would be the one to offer forgiveness first. But I wasn't ready. I had done the work. I had stood up for myself. And as much as I missed the idea of family, the reality was that they had taken advantage of me for too long. I wasn't going to rush back into their arms. I needed more time to heal. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Daniel, it was from Sarah. Her handwriting was shaky, her words carefully chosen, as if she had written and rewritten them 100 times before deciding to send it. It was a stark contrast to the confident, assertive tone she had carried during our earlier encounters. In her letter, she apologized, not just for her words, but for the way she had treated me. She acknowledged the years of neglect, of taking me for granted, of seeing me only for what I could provide, never considering what I needed or wanted. The letter was a raw, heartfelt attempt at making amends. Dear Eleanor, I'm not sure what to say or how to say it, but I know I owe you an apology. I know that I hurt you, and I can only imagine how much my words and actions have impacted you over the years. I never gave you the space to be who you were outside of the role I had set for you in my mind. I took you for granted, and for that, I am truly sorry. I can't undo what's been done, but I want you to know that I see you now. I see the sacrifices you made, the quiet love you offered without ever asking for anything in return. I understand now that I can't just take. I need to give, and I hope one day you'll forgive me for all the times I didn't see you, for all the times I made you feel like you weren't enough. I don't know what comes next, but I want to try. I hope that, in time, we can rebuild what was lost. I understand if you're not ready for that, but please know that I am here, and I am ready to listen. Sincerely, Sarah. I sat there for a long time after reading it, feeling the weight of her words. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was the start of something. Maybe it wouldn't be the same as it was before. Maybe the damage was too deep and the space between us was too wide to cross in one letter. But it was a step in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to carry the burden of our relationship alone. I wasn't ready to respond immediately, but I wasn't closed off to the possibility of healing either. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild not just my life, but my family, on my terms. I folded the letter carefully, placing it in a drawer for safekeeping. This wasn't the end of the journey, but it was a pivotal moment. And in that, I knew I was on the right path. The end was never really the end. It was always the beginning of something new. And as I stepped into the next chapter of my life, I finally understood what it meant to live for myself. Months passed, and with each one, the distance between me and the family I had once held so dear began to feel more like an abyss. But the apology from Sarah had created a crack in that distance, a tiny opening that hinted at the possibility of healing. It wasn't going to happen overnight. I knew that, but it was a start, a small, tentative step toward rebuilding the relationship I had so long neglected, both for my own sake and theirs. Despite my initial hesitation, I found myself thinking about Sarah's letter often. She had acknowledged the hurt, the things I had suffered in silence, and she had done so without expecting anything in return. For the first time, I felt as if I had been truly seen by her, and that alone was a powerful thing. It didn't excuse everything that had happened, but it offered a glimmer of hope that change was possible. I thought about responding to her, but I didn't know what I wanted to say. I wasn't ready to dive back into the chaos that had once defined our family, and it was too soon, and I had learned that boundaries were necessary for my own peace of mind. But I couldn't ignore the fact that Sarah's gesture, her attempt at taking accountability, had opened the door for something I hadn't felt in years, the possibility of connection. One evening, I found myself sitting on my small balcony, sipping a cup of tea, staring out at the changing colors of the sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. I had spent so much of my life looking outward, doing for others, caring for my family, putting my own dreams aside. But now I was starting to look inward, to really ask myself what I wanted from life. What did I need? What kind of future could I build for myself that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval or expectations? The sound of my phone buzzing broke my thoughts, and I glanced down to see a text from Lila, my friend from pottery class. She had invited me to an upcoming gallery show where she would be displaying some of her work. I hadn't known it at the time, but Lila was not just a friend. She was a mentor, a quiet force who had subtly been guiding me toward rediscovering my creative side, my strength. Her belief in me, in my ability to create and express myself without apologies, had given me the courage to step out of the shadows and into my own light. I smiled as I texted back, agreeing to meet her at the show. It wasn't a huge event, just a small local gallery, but to me it felt monumental. It was another step toward reconnecting with who I was before I became the invisible woman in the background of everyone else's life. As the day of the show approached, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. The house, the sale, the family rift, it had all been necessary. Painful, yes, but necessary. In order to rebuild something new, I had to clear the space first. And now, the space I had created for myself was filling with new people, new experiences, and a newfound sense of purpose. When I walked into the gallery, Lila was already there, surrounded by a few visitors admiring her pieces. She spotted me immediately and waved me over with a warm smile. I joined her, feeling a sense of ease that I hadn't felt in years. "This is your space, Eleanor," she said, her voice full of pride. "You're finally showing up for yourself." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle into my bones. It wasn't just about pottery or the gallery, it was about finally showing up for myself in every aspect of my life. I had been hiding for too long, afraid of disappointing others, afraid of being selfish. But now, I was learning that taking care of myself didn't mean I was abandoning anyone. It meant I was giving myself the tools to be better for the people I loved when I was ready. The night was a quiet success. I wasn't the center of attention, and I didn't need to be. For once, it didn't matter if anyone noticed me or praised me. I was there, experiencing something for myself. It was a small victory, but it was enough. Later that evening, as I drove home, the phone rang again. It was Daniel. I had expected this call eventually, but the hesitation I felt before answering was different now. I wasn't afraid of what he might say. I wasn't afraid of him trying to guilt me or manipulate me. I was no longer the woman who cowered in the face of their demands. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but quieter than I expected. "I've been thinking, a lot, about everything, about what you said, and I just want you to know that I'm sorry for everything too. For taking you for granted, for not seeing how much you gave. I've been so focused on my own life that I never took a moment to think about yours." His words hit me harder than I expected, and I found myself holding my breath as he spoke. This was it. The acknowledgement I had been waiting for, even if I hadn't realized how badly I needed it until now. "I can't fix everything we've lost, but I want to try. If you're willing, I'd like to start over. Slowly, but honestly. I don't expect things to be the way they were, but I hope we can find a new way to be family." For a moment, I was silent. I had been waiting for this apology for so long, and now that it was here, it felt strange, almost surreal. But I knew this was a beginning. It wasn't perfect, and I wasn't rushing back into their world, but it was a start, and that was all I needed for now. "I'm willing to try, Daniel," I said softly. "I don't know where this goes, but I'm willing to see." We ended the call with an unspoken understanding between us. We'd both been through too much to expect instant healing, but at least now we were both ready to start rebuilding, on our own terms. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time I felt a sense of peace in the unknown. I had made my choices, and they hadn't been easy, but they had led me to a place where I could finally breathe. I had my independence, my space, and most importantly, my voice. And that was enough. For now. The months that followed were a delicate dance between healing and growing, between maintaining my independence and reintroducing my family into my life. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. With Daniel and Sarah, I learned to navigate new boundaries, creating space for honest communication and vulnerability without losing the self-respect I had fought so hard to reclaim. We weren't the same family we once were, and maybe that was a good thing. The old dynamics had been broken, and in their place, something new was emerging. Something more honest, more grounded. I continued to explore my own path, spending more time in my pottery studio, creating pieces that spoke to the journey I had been on. Each curve, each shape, felt like a metaphor for the transformation I had undergone. With Lila's encouragement, I even began thinking about showing my work to others, offering my pieces at local art fairs. The idea of putting myself out there, of sharing my art with the world, felt like the final step toward fully embracing who I had become. The house, the sale, the rift with my family, it was all part of the past now, a chapter that had been closed. I had done what I needed to do to reclaim my life, and now I was living it. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. I wasn't afraid of what others might think. I was creating my own future, one day at a time. The road ahead wasn't clear, and I didn't expect it to be. But for the first time in my life, I was ready to face it, with no regrets and no fear. And for the first time, I truly felt free.